Happy June and happy Pride. Celebrating pride in all of us. All this month, Richard Skipper celebrates those that are making a difference in the LGBTQ community. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Friday, everyone. Happy Pride, happy June, happy whatever it is that you're celebrating. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. I'm Richard Skipper, and I'm all about celebrating. I love celebrating artists from all walks of life. What makes a great artist? How do they get from point A to point B and beyond? And today we're going to be celebrating 3 Ps: Patrick Riviere, Pride, and Provincetown. And it just so happens that he's here with me. How many years has it been, Patrick, since you and I have seen each other?
Oh, it's been a long time.
It's been a long time. And a lot's happened since we last saw each other. My career went in a completely different direction. We're going to catch up with everything that you've been doing. So sit back, everyone. If you're here for the first time and you like today's show, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates. Hit the like button. Leave us comments. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for either myself or Patrick, we welcome everything. So I want to begin by putting us in perspective with where we are right now. Let's start with Pride. What does Pride mean for you, Patrick?
For me, it just means trying to live the most authentic life that I can. And so much of that has to do with creativity in the arts. And so, you know, on a daily basis, and as I walk through my creative journey, just trying to be authentic and also just expressing myself through my art. A lot of the plays that I write, you know, the characters within those plays usually are dealing with issues of pride or coming out or, you know, being true to themselves. So I think that that's important for me, that authenticity.
Well, you mentioned you're a playwright, you are an actor, you are an arts educator, and your journey began, I guess, artistically in 1976 when you toured with the Bicentennial, which seems like it was just yesterday for me. So you were a child actor.
Yeah, actually, I always say that was sort of the first point of my career because it was the first time I worked with adults and professionals and people who had been in the business for a while. In actuality, when I was just 5 or 6 years old, we had 2-foot deep windowsills in our living room, and my mother would have people over for different events or for the holidays, and I would get up there and do a little song and dance, and everyone would laugh and you know, call me a ham. And so I loved sort of that aspect of making people laugh and having people, you know, enjoy entertainment even from a younger age. And then the year before the Bicentennial Roadshow, it was the year of the tooth. And one of my teachers wanted to do a play about teeth. And so I played the villain, Sir Desmond Decay. And so that was really my first introduction to theater. But that was working with, of course, other classmates. And it was, you know, sort of that type of thing. But the Bicentennial Roadshow toured in Western New York between Buffalo and Rochester. And I was the only juvenile with a speaking role. So that was, you know, an exciting moment in time for me.
Now, before we jump in, I want to let everyone know you may hear rolling thunder in the background. It is so loud here. I don't know if you're able to hear it. But if we disappear, Patrick, we will have to reschedule and everything. But my fingers are crossed that that's not going to happen. Mercury is in retrograde, so anything can and will happen. So are you originally from the Buffalo, Rochester area?
I am. I was born in a Batavia hospital, but was raised and went to school in a little town called Albion, New York, which is north of Batavia, near Lake Ontario.
Mhm.
We referred to it as a cow tipping town because a lot of the families were farmers, whether they had cows or corn or fruit farms. It was primarily a farming community, although my family was not in farming. My grandparents had owned a restaurant, and my grandfather, my mother's father, was a stone cutter from Italy and had a quarry. And a lot of the bridges in the area have his sandstone from his Medina sandstone quarry. So, yeah.
That's great. And brothers and sisters?
I had one sibling who was born with Down syndrome. And so he was born first, and then my mother had a miscarriage the next year and then had me. And she had me at 41 in the 60s, which was late at that time for a woman to have a child, particularly after she'd had complications with other pregnancies. My brother lived to be 16, and then he passed.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
But he's another reason, you mentioned about what does pride mean to me, and that it has to do with authenticity. He was one of the first examples for me of being an authentic self, because he had, he was primarily just joyous and playful. And of course he had suffered pain, and when he was aggravated by something, you knew it, but it was very simple. He had Rice Krispies every morning. If you tried to give him another cereal, he tossed the cereal out of the bowl, because that's not.
Well, I know people like that who don't have Down syndrome, so I'm not going to blame that on Down syndrome.
Right, but just the idea of he was very, he just did in that moment what he felt, and he was very authentic and true to himself, and so that was that early example of that authenticity.
Now, living up in that area, and I know the area very well because my husband is from Lewiston, just outside of Niagara Falls. Was your family involved at all with the arts, or was there a lot of exposure for the arts living up there at that time?
Yes and no. I was fortunate enough to have a family who was interested in the arts. My father, although he left when I was 3, so he wasn't really in the picture for my early years, but he had a band that he used to tour with, a little country western trio. My mother had a beautiful voice, and I think, could have done more with it, but felt she had responsibilities, and was also very interested in numbers. She was an accountant. But her younger sister, my aunt, who also helped raise me, she loved the theater and she loved Broadway. And so she went every year on trips. And eventually, when I was old enough, she sent me to New York with my mother to see Broadway shows. And of course, again, being involved so early with theater. And you mentioned Lewiston. I actually lived in Lewiston when I was in college, because I went to Niagara.
No. Are you serious? So there's a connection there.
Yes. And I lived at the dead end on 3rd Street, which on the other way dead end is Art Park, which at the time was in its heyday as a regional theater. And so, in the mid 80s, there were not a lot of universities that were affiliated with professional theaters. There are now, particularly grad programs. But I was in an undergrad program at Niagara, and we were affiliated with Art Park. So every spring we got to do shows on this incredible stage with these incredible people. Broadway credits and union people. And so that sort of early exposure to, those incredibly talented people was, I was very lucky and very grateful for that.
Now, I always like to go back to the 5-year-old self, if you've seen my previous shows. To me, the 5-year-old self is that time in a person's life before they start school, and before peer pressure is placed on you, and teachers start molding you into what they think you should or should not be. Tell us a little bit about the 5-year-old Patrick. I
think that I was very gregarious and, very animated and hyperactive. I was very hyperactive. In those days, they didn't have sort of the medications or the diagnoses that they have now, but they probably would have said I was ADD or something like that. But I was always running around, always, loved to play, loved to entertain, and, also was eager to please. I was very eager to please at that age. And I think part of that had to do with my brother, having the disability that he did. And also that my mother, having had her husband leave her and having these two children to raise, the pressure on her, and I wanted to please her. I didn't want to make her life more difficult than it already was. So I do feel that at 5, there was sort of that dichotomy of, you know, make them laugh, but it was also because I wanted to, you know, have the attention and please people.
I can't even imagine walking in your mom's shoes with all that she had to deal with. And God bless her. What was your mom's name?
Genevieve.
So Genevieve, this is for you today. So she deserves it. I want to, when you were going to school, did you have the opportunity in your class to have an exposure to music and plays and the arts?
Yes, we had very early exposure to music and singing. I remember learning, everyone had to learn on music on the flutophone, which was that plastic little sort of clarinet. And so everyone had a flutophone and we learned the flutophone. And then in grade school, I wanted to play the drums and my mother said, absolutely not. So I ended up playing the trumpet. And so I was exposed in the band playing trumpet. And then there was an opportunity for, we were going to be doing the theme from Superman. And there's a solo in Superman that's played by a euphonium, and we had no euphonium players. And so I volunteered to start playing euphonium, and I loved the euphonium. The embouchure is looser than the trumpet, which was always a challenge for me. The embouchure is so tight on a trumpet, although not as bad as a French horn. But so I learned and started playing the euphonium and loved that. I was also in the chorus. We had chorus and choirs, and I was involved in that. So, and then when I got to high school, it was really where there was an opportunity to do some plays and musicals.
Now, you and I are both baby boomers. Did you grow up in a television household?
We did. We had television, and you know, my mother loved her soap operas, but I wasn't glued to the TV. And of course, where I grew up, we had, you know, 3 channels, and we got one out of Canada as well. So it was 2, 4, 7, and 9, and 9 was the Canadian station. And so we did watch television, but it wasn't as big a part of our life or our culture as, say, you know, I wanted to be outside playing with friends all the time. And in school, as soon as there was extracurricular activities to do, I wanted to be involved with those. So I often didn't come home, you know, when other students might be coming home, or students that had responsibilities because their family needed them on the farm. So they would leave school and go right home to work. Thankfully, I didn't have that situation where I had that responsibility. So I was involved in student council and band. I played tennis. So I got to stay at school and be involved in those things. So I didn't watch as much TV as I might have.
And I mean, growing up, I mean, watching, was there a particular show that you did watch on a regular basis? And where did the spark begin for you, wanting to just entertain? I know that you said earlier that you had this need or this desire to please everyone. Did it start there, or did you even think that theater or being an actor was something that you wanted to do?
You know, I didn't know early on. I just knew, I think because my mother was singing a lot when she was around me, and we would sing together. We played this song game where you went through the alphabet and each person had to sing a song that either the title started with that letter or the first word of the song started with that letter. And we would do that in the car on trips. And, you know, we would do that as entertainment for ourselves. And so I think that early on, there was just a joy that came with particularly singing for me. I love to sing. And then that was cultivated and nurtured through grade school. And thankfully, we had such a wonderful sort of music program in particular. But I don't think I thought about it as a profession. I do remember a story that my mother told me later that one of her best friend's husband was an ad executive in New York City. And he had seen me and you know, and even as a little boy bouncing around and doing all this, you know, sort of singing and dancing around. And he told my mother, you should take him to New York, Jen. She went by Jen. And he'll make you a lot of money and he'll pay his way through college because, you know, he's this little spunky thing and he could get commercials and whatever. And my mother's told me that she said to him, I appreciate that, but no, I want him to have a childhood. And when he's old enough if he wants to do that at some point and make the decision for himself, then I'll support that. But I'm not going to push him to do something that he may or may not want to do.
So what was the first time that you actually appeared on stage, and how did that come about?
The very first time that I was on stage in a show was that show that was done for the Year of the Tooth in school in 3rd grade. And so, you know, the teachers, I don't remember if they had auditions or they just assigned roles, but I played Sir Desmond Decay, the villain, and I still remember my first entrance line, which was, ha ha ha, there goes my prize, the beautiful lady Terry Tooth, all alone. Now's my chance while her brave protector Sir Bertram Brush is away doing good deeds.
That's a lot to remember it in the 3rd grade. But that's, again, that moment that you're on stage for the first time, you must have gotten either laughter, applause, etc. And you decide, this is what I want to do with my life.
I loved it. I loved that sort of attention, and I loved making people laugh. That was a big part of it. I loved hearing laughter and people coming up and saying, oh, you were so funny. You were so funny. And I think that also plays into that my mother had such a heavy burden to carry. And so she had a lot of stress and a lot of sadness. And being the clown and seeing her, being able to make her laugh and then in turn making other people laugh I loved what that did for others and what it did for me. And so then as I went forward, and certainly in high school, I started getting more roles. That's really in high school is when I started thinking about, I think I might like to do this as a career or make the attempt at least.
So was the decision to move to New York right after doing shows with Art Park and the things that you were doing in the surrounding areas? When did that move take place?
So originally, there was a lot of naysayers about me going to even college for theater. My mother was the big supporter, but my teachers were very upset, and some of them actually called my mother and said, how can you allow him to do this? He's very good at math and science. He should be going into engineering. This is foolish. When you come from my graduating class was less than 100. And so it's a very small town and people are in everyone's business. And, they told it like it was, and they felt I was.
You and I were on a similar path, believe it or not. I can't believe that you just said this, because I had teachers that did the same thing to my parents.
And so, but I was one of the first people have told me that I was the first person from my town ever that they know of to go to school for theater, to go to college for theater. And so initially I was planning to go to grad school, and I started a grad program in North Carolina, and it was brand new. They had never had a master's program before. And you were double majoring in performance and directing. And I'd gotten an interest in directing and writing in college from my mentor in college. And so I thought, you know what, I would like to get more training and have a master's degree, not because I thought I wanted to teach, but because I thought there was more to learn. And of course, there's always more to learn. But when I started the program, I had 2 different tenured faculty come to me separately behind closed doors and say, if you know you want to teach, by all means stay and get the degree. But if you want to be a performer, we really believe that you would be better served going to New York and taking classes and really being in the mix because you're ready. And this is a brand new master's program. So we're learning, like, your undergrad program was stronger than our master's program is set to be.
Wow.
And I was grateful for their honesty. And so I left the program after a month and moved to New York from there. And I had done a summer of summer stock after college in Waterville, Maine, at the Waterville Opera House. And then went to grad school for that month and then moved to New York City.
Now, when you moved to New York City, what year was that?
Oh, that was the winter of '88.
Wow, you came much later than I did. New York had started to gentrify a little bit more by that point. But when you came to New York, did you know anyone in New York? How did you get acclimated? And when did you feel, or did you ever feel, like you were a New Yorker?
I think when I first came to New York, even before I moved, when my aunt set my mother and I on that trip to go see some Broadway shows, I'm getting emotional, well, which I tend to do. Okay. I really felt like I was home. I never fit in the small town atmosphere. I loved it. It was a beautiful place to grow up. I would never knock it. The teachers were extraordinary. The friendships I had were wonderful. But as a young gay man, it was very difficult being in such a small town because it was like the Bible Belt of the North. Very conservative, very religious. And I was, I grew up in an Italian Roman Catholic family and was very involved in the church. And I say Italian Roman Catholic because I feel Italians have more guilt. I don't know. But when I first went to New York for that trip, I really felt like, wow, this is home.
And what was the first Broadway show that you saw?
Evita. And our seats were not good. And we were a little disappointed just because the leads had left already. I mean, it was a wonderful show. But then we stood on the TKTS line and got what they called twofers at the time. They called them twofers. Right. We got twofers to see Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat with the original cast. And we got 6th row center aisle.
Now, was this the production that was on 2nd Avenue with Laurie Beachman?
Yes.
Oh, my God. Wow.
And my jaw was on the floor for that entire production.
I'll tell you, she walked out on stage and I sat on the edge of my seat with my jaw hitting the floor. And I was with a friend that I had met from a friend of hers was in a show that I was doing. And she wrote a letter to Laurie Beachman telling Laurie Beachman how excited I was to see her on stage, that I was fresh off the farm from South Carolina. And Laurie Beachman wrote me the most incredible letter welcoming me to New York and to the theater. And that letter and that photograph that she sent me traveled around with me. And then I was doing a show. The theater was vandalized. The photograph was ripped to shreds.
Oh, no.
And my friend told Laurie Beachman about this. And she sent me another photograph, taped a key to the back, and said, keep this one locked up. So that show has a very special meaning for me as well. I want to talk about something, especially since we're talking about Pride right now. And if I get too personal, push me away. But growing up in a small town such as I did, when did you first know that you were gay? And if you can take us back to, for those who don't know, the trauma of people finding out that we are gay. It's a very important topic I think we should talk about.
Well, it's interesting because from when I was very little, short, I was very short. I still am, but for my age when I was a younger boy, everybody was taller than I was. And so I was picked on from a very early age and bullied for being short. And, again, in a small town at that time, families were together. There was not a lot of separation and divorce in the town I was in. So the fact that my mother was a single mother, that led to certain, issues and bullying as well. And, I was considered a mama's boy, which was true. And I heard a lot of those really derogatory words that people call homosexuals before I was even had thoughts about sexual. And when I got a little older, I thought to myself, did they know before I did? But what I learned was a lot of those people that used those words called everyone those words when they were angry. They were calling the football quarterback those names. Mm-hmm. But when I was around 11 or 12, I really began to feel like I was different. And not just because I liked musicals and theater and singing, but I felt different from everyone else. And I started feeling attraction to boys. Mm-hmm. And because of the church, of course, that felt very wrong. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't have any references locally to anyone who was gay, certainly out of the closet. So there was no reference point for me. And it was difficult because I was bullied. And then, of course, when I came to an age where I started thinking, oh, I am different, I think I might be gay, I didn't say anything to anyone. And I had a girlfriend all through high school. Mm-hmm. We are still friends to this day. But I also then started experimenting, what I'll call sweetly with boys of my own age. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget the first time it was my freshman year of high school, and I was playing Snoopy in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. That was my first real musical. Mm-hmm. And the young actor playing Linus, who was a sophomore in high school, he followed me one day after it was during rehearsals when the whole school was shut down except for where we rehearsed. And he followed me into this room and he kissed me. And I thought I was going to die. Like it was like, it was the best thing ever. And it was that innocent, but it was also this feeling that, oh, this is right. Even though everybody says it's wrong, this feels right. So I would struggle throughout high school. And then it was in my freshman year of college, because I went to school for theater, I finally met people that were out of the closet, that said, within 10 minutes, they were letting you know that they were gay or that they had a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever the situation was. And it was new for me to see people that were open about who they were. And so I came out to my mother first break freshman year of college. And, I am one of the lucky and grateful young gay boys who had a mother who just loved me and embraced me, because so many children don't. So many youngsters don't get that embrace and that love and that support from certainly their blood family. They may find that family elsewhere, and that's just as beautiful and just as legitimate. But when you're younger, it's the blood family that means most to you. And so to have that rejection can be devastating. And I had the opposite. I had unconditional love and support from my mother.
Well, I want to talk about a few first in your life. You moved to New York. You're getting acclimated. What was your first non-theatrical job in New York?
My first non-theatrical job in New York, my roommate, we had been roommates in college, and he was getting ready to move to New York. He'd taken a year and done some local things before, so he was a year older than I was, but we both got this basement apartment, which we found out later was illegal because of fire, we would have been trapped. But a basement apartment on the Upper West Side on 96th and West End Avenue.
Wow, great location.
Right? And he had gotten a job with this temp agency. And so I then got involved with the temp agency. And so I was doing temp jobs. But the first...
What was the temp agency that you worked for?
Leafstone. And they've set me on this position to work at Chrysalis Records, who ironically are they were the record company that produced Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat's cast album from Broadway. And they also represented Kenny Loggins. So they had a few they were a smaller label. And I found a multi-million-dollar mistake in one of their contracts. And the vice president of the division that I was temping in offered me, and this would have been in 1989, offered me a $75,000 a year job. And I said, no. And he said, excuse me? And he said, nobody gets this opportunity. I said, I realize that and I am grateful, but I'm here to be an actor and that's what I want to do. And so I know that this is that sort of once in a lifetime job offer, but it's not in the field that I want to be in. And so thank you, but no thank you.
Wow. And then you went back to temping.
And then I went back to, doing other jobs at different places. And I got a few job offers from the temp world. But, then I started getting some theater gigs and some shows. And so I was able to put that aside. But I had promised my mother that I wouldn't wait tables. And here's why. She didn't want, because her mother in particular was a chef and had restaurants. And so as a little girl, she had grown up, being a bus girl and then waitressing and bartending. And she said, honey, it's the hardest work in the world. Like, people don't realize you're on your feet the whole time. You're dealing with the public, people pleasing. And even though that's what you're doing as an entertainer, it's a little different. And so she said, if you can do anything else, do something else other than wait. So I didn't wait tables. I did other things.
Now, when you got to New York, did you know the rules of the game, how to play? Did you know about backstage and show business, about auditions? How did you find out? I
knew a little bit about some of those things because thankfully at Niagara University, our senior year, we had a special class that we took that was sort of to be an introduction of what it would be like to be in the professional world. So we did mock auditions and got feedback, because a lot of our teachers were folks that did things in New York or at least at regional theaters, and so they knew the professional way of doing things. So they talked to us about the industry or the business of the business, as we say. And so learning about backstage and where to find auditions. But the overwhelming largeness of New York and of the industry in New York was shocking. That was something that I was not necessarily prepared for. And the lines of people at auditions, having to get, because of my summer stock experience, I got something that at the time was called eligibility for the union.
Right.
And so I was eligible to audition with all the union actors at Actors Equity Association. And the lines would be at 6 o'clock in the morning. We're down the block for, some of these shows. And it wasn't even Broadway. It was regional theaters and smaller productions. But there was a lot of people trying to get work. So
were you that actor who hung out at the newsstand waiting for the backstage to arrive?
I used to come in because then when I ended up living in Weehawken, New Jersey. And so I would schlep in early to get to one of the news in Port Authority, the newsstands to unwrap the backstage. Yeah.
Oh my God, a different world. And do you recall the first audition that you went on?
I don't remember the first audition that I went on, but I know that it wasn't long before I got a show. It was a showcase off Broadway, non-union. Ironically, it was playing the role that sort of followed me for a lot of my career. I played Snoopy in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown at 1010 Theater, which was on the Upper East Side. They're now 2020, Theater 2020, but they were 1010 Theater. And I did a couple shows with them, but the first one was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown.
And you started doing summer stock. You started going on the road. What was the show that you got your equity card for? And if you can tell us what that experience was like for you at that moment.
That was wild, I will say. This is wild. So I got cast in a summer production of South Pacific at Candlewood Playhouse.
Oh, my God.
And, I mean, the folks in this were... it was sort of the jaw on the floor thing all during rehearsals and performance. Diane Della Piazza played our Nellie, who had been in the original cast of Les Mis. Mark Embry was Emile Debec, and he was well known on the opera circuit. Dolores Garcia was our Bloody Mary. I mean, just the list went on of all these incredible people. And John Klontz was the director. And so I was non-union, and I was non-union for the show. Mm-hmm. Well, somehow the Schubert organization got word of the production and was interested in possibly bringing our production to Broadway. And so they asked the producers to restage it again at the end of the season. So we were all brought back. And when we were brought back...
Oh, that's very unusual, by the way, everyone. That's unusual.
Right? I mean, it's unheard of. And when they brought me back the second time to do the show, I was offered my equity card. And so I took it. And of course, then the Schuberts passed and said they felt the show was too dated. And of course, as we know, then Lincoln Center would revive it a few years ago. But that was a special time with that show, I have to say. It was really special.
Who did you play in South Pacific?
Stu Pot.
So did I.
Did you?
I was Stu Pot. And when you got your equity card, was it a blessing or a curse for you at that moment? Because we all dream of getting our equity card, and it's like the holy grail. And once you get it, it gets a lot harder for the shows that you're able to audition for. At least you have these opportunities that are no longer available to you.
Yeah, it was tough. I was excited, of course, because I had been offered my equity card before that. But a lot of my, peers and colleagues said, if all you have is university and then a children's theater tour, a lot of producers realize you got your equity card doing this children's theater tour. And, so I wanted to build my resume, and I did. So I did a lot of these off Broadway shows, but it did sort of give me other theaters in New York that people recognize. So it wasn't just university and the show. So when I got my card, I thought I was ready for it. But as you say, the real world of then entering that pool of all the union actors, so many of whom have wonderful credits and have worked with so many incredible people, and you're still really low on the rung of the ladder, it was a challenge. And I found that I was still doing a lot of those showcases, because you could be in the union and do the showcases in New York. But in terms of, the larger productions, off-Broadway, Broadway, regional theaters, it was, I was getting something here and there, but it wasn't the steady flow of work that I had before I joined the union.
And what was the longest period that you've been without work, excluding, of course, this past year, but due to just life in the theater?
I took mostly self-imposed breaks because, thankfully, and I'm so grateful for this with my mentors and my family and the support that I had, I found early on that I loved other aspects of our art and of our creative form. And so there were so many other things, where some of my peers came to New York, and within 6 months or a year, they didn't feel they'd done enough, and they left the business forever. And I could leave acting, but not leave the business, because I loved arts administration. I loved arts education. I loved to direct and to write. And so all of those things they lent themselves, or lent myself, to be able to do things that were peripheral to a performing life and career, and kept me feeling really creative and connected. But I wasn't necessarily, I think one of my longest breaks was when I worked at TISCH School of the Arts at NYU. I was in the drama department as the first industry professional liaison, and also on the adjunct faculty. And that was a 5-year period where I didn't audition for anything, because I loved my job and I loved my students. And maybe I was living vicariously through them, and that was okay, because they were doing wonderful things, and I loved that.
And was there ever a moment in your career where you felt, I've made it, this is exactly the life that I envisioned for myself?
It's so funny that you asked that question, because I think when I was younger, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I had this idea in my head of, I would get to New York, and eventually I'd be on Broadway. And I had my Tony Award acceptance speech all memorized for years. And somehow in my mind, I had been, I had thought and believed that those things would equal success, and that without them, I wasn't successful. But as I grew up, and as I matured, and as I spent more time in the world that, we love so much in the theater, I realized that that's not what defines success. What defines success is the joy you find in the work, the people that you're able to collaborate with, and the things that you learn, the people you touch along the way. And that, I've gotten letters in my career, even from smaller regional productions, that I get the letter from somebody I don't know, and it makes it all worth it. This is why I do what I do, to touch just one person. A play I wrote in Chicago was rightly panned by the critics. It was not a good play. It was one of my first full-length plays. It had a lot of problems. But I got a letter from a woman who said she was finally able to deal with a trauma in her life because of my play. And that's all that mattered. That one woman, that it was worth it to write that awful play for that one woman that was moved by it. And so success for me, or that I've made it, I always tell people my career was front loaded. I got to do things in college because of Art Park, working with Gemze de Lappe and Charles Strouse.
Oh my God, I can't believe you just mentioned her name. I was just watching her the other night in Brigadoon. Yes, wow.
I mean, as you know, she was the only choreographer given permission by the estate of DeMille to do the original Oklahoma choreography. And so we were doing Oklahoma at Art Park, and they brought her in to do it. And it was incredible to work with this. We used to call her the little Tweety Bird, because if you don't know her, it didn't seem possible that she did what she did, because she was such a petite little gal. And she was already, I think when we did the show together, she had to have at least been, I want to say 70. Bless her, she lived, I think, into her 90s.
She just passed away just recently, not too long ago. Yes.
And I'll never forget something she said to me. I decided that I was gonna go ahead and audition for Curly, even though I am not a Curly. But I thought, you know what? I've got the opportunity. I'm going to sing Oh, What a Beautiful Morning. So I sang it. And Gemze came up to me after the audition and she said, Patrick, if we could close our eyes, you could play Curly, but we can't. So you're Allie Hackham.
Well, God bless her. And God bless the fact that you got the chance to work with her. I mean, who are some of the people that you've had the opportunity of working with throughout your career, whether they be famous or not famous, who have made an impact on you both as an artist and as a human being?
I think my mentor in college, Brother Augustin Tui, who ran the program at Niagara, was just a huge influence. You know, he was also the one who encouraged me to start writing. And that was someone who most people wouldn't know of that name, but he was a huge influence on my life and on my career. And also, as you say, on being a person, and learning from him about, you know, responsibility. Mm-hmm. And just being a professional isn't just about talent. It's about showing up to a rehearsal on time, you know, respecting other people's boundaries, how collaboration works. So all of those things. And then, of course, Gemze, Bev Fletcher, who, you know, was a dance teacher who taught Michael Bennett. And I got to dance in her studio in college. Sam Viverito, who is, you know, known internationally now as a director. Charles Strouse and Lee Adams, getting to work with them directly on the North American premiere of I and Albert. And the late, great Maurice Daniels, who was a director for the RSC. And had directed Gielgud and Olivier, and he directed me in 3 Shakespeare plays. So, and again, a lot of that was front loaded early on in college. And then later, I have to say that one of the most beautiful experiences I had working in a production was a few years ago now, but I got to play a dream role of mine that I'd missed out on, and I was cast in it once and then turned it down to do Snoopy my final time in the tribute production when Charles Schultz died. But I was cast as Sancho in Man of La Mancha at Merry-Go-Round Playhouse. And Jen Waldman, who has a studio in New York City, and who herself had been a performer on Broadway, she directed the production. And that was a really beautiful experience and a really special. I felt like it was one of the first times in the world of musical theater that I felt like we merged just honest and truth with, you know, because people think of musical theater as louder, faster, funnier, and you know, it's the make them laugh. And of course, La Mancha is a much more serious piece to begin with, but Sancho is often can be done as a stereotype.
That's right.
And we sort of wanted to avoid that and really find the truth and honesty within this character who loved his master and what that meant, that relationship meant. Mm-hmm. So not just the foil or the goofball, but someone, there's certainly elements of that because that's in the writing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How long did you stay in New York before you decided to move away?
Well, I was in New York probably for, I want to say, 4 or 5 years. And then I met my first husband, even though it wasn't legal to be married at that time. My mother was actually still alive, and she came and we had a ceremony, and she gave me away. And we had a little apartment on 86th and West End Avenue. It was a duplex. But my husband was offered a position in Chicago at Theater Building, which at the time in Chicago was this facility that had 3 different theater stages in one building. So that's why they called it Theater Building on Belmont Avenue. So we moved to Chicago and started a theater company there. And so then I was in Chicago for a few years, and then our relationship ended and I came back to New York. And that's when I really got more involved with administrative theater. My first job back after Chicago, I worked at Second Stage Theater as their education coordinator.
Which, by the way, wasn't Second Stage where Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat was? It was in that area.
Well, Second Stage at the time was way up on the Upper West Side. And it was where 3 Tall Women played downstairs for years in that big theater. And then Second Stage had the McGinn-Kazal Theater, which was just a small little sort of slope theater that was upstairs from that. And that's where I worked. This was before they moved downtown to their space in Midtown, Second Stage.
Now, I may know the answer to this next question, but how did you, we're going to go to the next chapter, the chapter that you're living now. How did you end up in Provincetown?
So my second relationship, which was very long-term, almost 18 years, we came up to Provincetown once or twice a year. We loved it up here. And so when that relationship had come to an end, I had decided to come to Provincetown on my own. And I needed to I had one of those eat, pray, love moments. And came to Provincetown and sort of had this whole cathartic thing. And what was my life going to be without a husband, basically? Because most of my adult life, I'd been with a partner, with a husband. And also, what was it going to be like? Because I was in between jobs. I wasn't sure what was going to be happening. And I thought, I'll also not be able to come back to Provincetown in the season because it gets so expensive. But if you come on the shoulder seasons, like in May or September, October, you can get good deals. Well, somebody said, well, you know that the Portuguese festival at the end of June coincides with Pride in New York, and pretty much everybody goes to Pride. And so you can get good deals. And I thought, I'm going to go, I need a second dose before the end. And I came to Provincetown at the end of June, and I met my current husband, who was living and working here. Didn't know he would be my husband, but we met, we hit it off right away. And we started having a long-term relationship because I was in New Jersey and he was in Provincetown. And that was 10 years ago this month.
Wow.
And so then he was on his way to moving to Los Angeles. So I moved with him and actually did a lot of directing out there. I did some performing, but mostly directing. And then he ended up, we ended up moving back to Provincetown, and we just celebrated in May our 8th wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations. That's great. And what is it about Provincetown? I can only imagine that this past year must have seemed very strange, obviously, as the rest of the world. But Provincetown is a destination town. I am going to be there. I'm not going to say when because I don't like to tell people when I'm away. But I will be there this summer, and hopefully we'll see each other.
We will see each other.
Yes. And I'm already making so many people that I'm going to be interviewing over the next week. 3 people are going to be performing in Provincetown this summer. So I can't wait to get back. But what is it for you that you love about Provincetown?
Well, when I first started coming here, of course, just the acceptance and the ability to be yourself, whoever you are. They call it the island of misfit toys. Mm-hmm. And so that encompasses everyone and everything. It encompasses eccentric artists. It encompasses the LGBTQ plus community. It encompasses people of color, all walks of life, all education. So it really is such a welcoming place and welcoming community. And as a young gay man, even though we were in New York City, where there's places, of course, in New York City where you feel very comfortable and you feel like you can be yourself in New York. There were lots of other places within the city that I would not hold my boyfriend or my husband's hand, for example, because I still held fear. And I'd see younger couples, and I would say internally, or sometimes even, thank you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your willingness to do what I'm still too afraid to do. Walk through Port Authority. I would never walk through Port Authority with holding my husband's hand. And I'd see younger couples do, and I'd think, bless them for, not for moving through their fear and for standing tall. But that's what Provincetown was. I never felt afraid to hold my partner's hand in Provincetown. Mm-hmm. And that freedom of expression, that it really is a melting pot of everyone being here. And there's also, the Provincetown players and the Provincetown theater, the community of art and the writers like Tennessee Williams, the people that were called this place their home, and painters and such incredible artists. I think that's also another draw is that sort of the creative spark that lives here.
And how long did it take you to feel that you were actually a part of Provincetown?
It's interesting because sometimes I feel like I'm still not, because I'm a wash ashore, and there's so many people that have been here for decades or their whole lives. And that's on me, not on the town. that's on my shoulders to, it's not anyone rejecting me. It's more that I feel like the interloper. I don't want to, invade or take over your space that you've held for all these decades, or, 5 generations of families. So it's, and truthfully, up until this year, we lived in Truro, which is the next town over, but it's like a whole different world. Mm-hmm. And so we would come in for events and to see shows and things like that, but we weren't living within the culture at that time. So, and then we moved during COVID when there was nothing happening. So I'm excited about this next phase to actually be able to, be in town, living here now, and experiencing it as somebody who lives here.
Mm-hmm. I was in Provincetown in October for Columbus Day weekend. And I will say this, everybody was wearing their mask. I went to a socially distanced show at the Crown and Anchor. I remember that a friend of ours got a ticket, and she came in and she wanted to sit with us. And they said, no, they followed the rules to a T. They said, we have configured the seating for this show. And so God bless them. Do you go to a lot of the shows in Provincetown?
I try to see a lot of different types of shows. As you know, there's drag shows, there's performance art, there is showgirls, which just allows local talent to get up and do their thing.
Ryan Landry.
Yes, Ryan,
yes.
Who also has his Stardust Orphans, and they produce incredible shows that are just out of this world. I love his work and the work that they produce. There's Provincetown Theater, and now David Drake, a few years ago, took the helm of Provincetown Theater and has done a remarkable job producing, incredible theater there. There's several other theater companies in Provincetown that do work. And then there's readings, poetry readings, and all of the art shows and the galleries doing openings. And so throughout our time here, even when we weren't living in town, we were constantly coming back to town to see a lot of these, and the things at the Crown and Anchor, the wonderful shows there. So seeing all of those shows at the Art House that they bring in celebrities to perform every summer. And some of the people from RuPaul's Drag Race come and do shows. So there's never a time if you come in the summer that you can't see incredible performances and art.
So what's ahead for Provincetown over, let's say, the next 4 to 5 weeks that you're very excited about seeing?
So there's a few things, of course, with the restrictions, folks were weary about announcing seasons or trying to do anything. The Provincetown Theater is actually built an outside stage now for the summer. So they won't be performing indoors, they'll be performing outdoors, like in their parking lot area. And they've got a couple of shows that they're doing, one called The Cake, which is about a woman who bakes cakes, and a lesbian couple wants them to it's based on sort of the real life of the bakery that rejected a couple who wanted a wedding cake. So that's going to be on their docket, which I'm really looking forward to seeing this summer. Some of the regulars that come back that I love to see, like Dina Martina. I know Dina personally, so it's always fun to try to see Dina's show every year because it changes. There's a group that I'm now involved with that's just launching called Campfire Quorum. And we were supposed to do an introduction fundraiser over Memorial Day weekend, but it got canceled from the rain, so we're rescheduling. But it's basically small groups are given a tour guide, and they tour through the dunes and see 3 different scenes from the upcoming shows they're going to be producing. So
wow, what a great idea.
Right? So they're doing The Witch and Peter Pan and The Tempest, and I'm playing Smee in Peter Pan. So...
Good for you. This is great. Now, I've got a lightning round of questions to round off. And these are questions that are sent to me, believe it or not. Who have you been most frustrated by in your life?
Oh, gosh, who have I been most frustrated by? I think I don't have a specific person, but a type of person. I think I've been most frustrated by people who are not collaborative by nature. And are so focused on the very specific that they're unmovable. So I would say that would be the folks that I've been most frustrated by.
Okay. When were you closest to being a champion?
Oh gosh, these are tough questions. I think that I was closest to being a champion when I recognized that I was okay just where I was. So in a daily moment, if I'm healthy and happy and, you know, living the life that I've been able to choose for myself, I'm a champion in those moments.
That's a great answer. When were you most moved by a ceremony?
I was most moved by a ceremony. Well, I don't know. I will say, I can tell you the time I was most moved I had a really moving moment in the theater. And it was when I went to see the play As Is. And it was, you know, I was still young and not really out to too many people. And this was a play about AIDS on Broadway. And I remember I was the only person who stood at the end of the play, and everybody in the audience sort of looked at me. And I was weeping at the end of the play. That's something that sticks in my mind of being so moved that it didn't matter who was around me or what they were. It was so, for me, it was so emotional that I had to stand.
That's great. Who is the person that you know with the freest spirit?
I think my husband has an incredible free spirit. It's one of the things that I fell in love with. He's just kind and is constantly creating and constantly, you know, just putting things out there and not worried about. I've often been worried about what the criticism would be or what people would think, or is this good enough? He's not worried about that. It's just about the creation and being out there.
That's great. What was the most difficult choice that you've ever had to make?
I think the most difficult choice I ever made was deciding that I was going to leave performing for a while. And this wasn't when I was at TISCH, but after TISCH, I had an experience where I was attacked in Dayton, Ohio when I was on tour. And I was mugged in a gang initiation and was bleeding and semi-conscious and robbed. And it changed me. That violation changed my way of thinking. And after that, I was frightened for a very long time. And so and I had to go through this period where I decided that I couldn't perform because I was too afraid. I wasn't finding the joy. That would shift. But at that time, it was a very, very hard decision to say I wasn't going to even audition anymore.
Wow. Wow. What an amazing thing to go through. What is the most disturbing sound that you know of?
I think someone screaming in pain.
And what was the best gift that you ever gave to someone?
I think the best gift I ever gave to someone was when I worked at TISCH and I fought real hard to save money in the budget the first year I ran the high school summer program so that I could give scholarship the second year, and being able to give it to someone who would not have been able to come to the program if not for the scholarship, and their gratitude. It's priceless.
Well, I want to thank you for giving me the gift of sitting with me. This wasn't painful, was it?
No. It was a joy to be with you.
Oh, good. I want to thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank everybody who spent the last hour with us. I know that I can speak for Patrick when I say this. We don't take for granted the fact that you could have been anywhere else for the past hour. And the fact that you chose to spend it with us is something that I take to my heart. So thank you for being here. I want to thank everyone for being here again. Please, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube. I'm all about celebrating, and we've got some great artists coming up over the next few weeks. Just go there and see what's coming up. Some great people, some you know, some you don't know, but all of them are people that you should know. I also end my shows by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the fourth name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not an inbox message, but a phone call. And let those people know what they mean to you. Because as a dear friend of mine says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. You never know what someone is going through right now. But if you're going to be out in a boat, make sure that you bring a skipper along. Now, before we end the show, I'm actually going to leave. Patrick, I want to thank you for the gifts that you've given to the world and that you will continue to give. I've got one last question for you. What's your favorite restaurant in Provincetown?
I'm very close with the family who runs the Lobster Pot, and I love the Lobster Pot so much. And I think that's what I'll say for that.
Well, make a reservation. I'll see you there.
Okay, dear.
Okay. Now, I'm going to leave the screen right now, and I'm going to give you the final word because this is about you. Anything that we talked about today that you want to expound upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to the world right now. And again, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I think I'm just grateful to be where I am in my life right now. And part of that has been just through acceptance and coming to realize that if we can embrace the joy that we have, and I think for me, initially when I was growing up, I was always struggling with the people pleasing and trying to fit in and needing sort of everyone else to approve of me and to lift me up and give me that validation. And while those things can be important, I think finding within your own resources to believe in yourself, to love yourself, to forgive yourself, because I've screwed up plenty. I think those are the things that I'd want to share about myself, and also hope that others would try to follow that path, to just try to be true, try to find the joy. And since we're celebrating Pride Month, happy Pride. Love is love is love. Thank you.